welcome to the podcast. I'm Dave Niven, and this is the Social World podcast, Thoughts on the Social World, and I'm very pleased to have your company again today. Now, today I'm going to be talking with Alice Newton, and Alice is the Suicide Prevention Training Coordinator for Papyrus, which is a national charity dedicated to supporting young people who are contemplating suicide, and also the charity raises awareness about the level of need in the community, which I do assure you is quite substantial. So, welcome, Alice. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And maybe we could just start by outlining to people what Papyrus is all about, could you?
Yeah, absolutely. Papyrus, as you said, is the national charity dedicated to the prevention of young suicide. It began in 1997 by a lady called Jean Kerr, who sadly lost her son to suicide, and a group of parents who'd all lost a child to suicide got together in Jean's living room and said, you know what, we actually need to do more about this. We need to have more support for friends, family, believing that they have a unique perspective when it comes to young suicide. And so we've grown from there, sort of a localised charity up in the northwest region to now, as you've mentioned, being a national charity, providing a number of different services to the UK, which I can go into more detail later on.
Yeah, I think I'd like that, because I think the very fact that you're growing obviously shows that Papyrus is having an influence, but it also shows there's an awful lot of work to be done.
Absolutely.
Now, I've got some statistics here, and they are quite serious. I mean, I've got a statistic from Papyrus that in 2013, 1,600 young people under 35 killed themselves, and of them, 700 were under 25.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite a stark figure, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what you've just named there is in my opinion, a national scandal, really, that we're losing that number of young people to suicide, which actually makes it the leading cause of death in under 35 in the UK, which is just shocking.
I know you personally specialise in training, but you also sort of supervise the helpline that you have, and therefore you get sort of very personal contact with the range of issues that come up that cause young people to actually feel this way. I mean, I was looking at your site, and I think people listening will realise that the obvious ones, bullying and relationships and money worries and family expectations, body image and all that. I mean, plus, and we'll talk about more as we go, but I mean, it's such a wide range of stresses on young people, isn't it? I mean, you must have a great deal of difficulty in helping them focus.
Yeah, I mean, just to put that helpline into context, for those who don't know about our helpline, we run a national helpline known as HOPELineUK that is manned by mental health professionals, so suicide prevention advisors, who provide advice and information and support to either anyone under the age of 35 who is thinking about suicide, but also anyone concerned about them, be that professional, a friend, a colleague, a family member, etc. And you're right, the young people that do come into contact with the helpline who are having thoughts of suicide themselves will have those for a huge variety of reasons. And it's not usually down to kind of one single contributing factor. It can be a lot of things that have either built up over time, or just something that is really significant to them that maybe for others on the outside they may not realise perhaps the impact it's having on that person. For example, changing a course at college, or losing a pet animal, things like that might appear on the outside as not really that big a deal, but to that individual, they've lost something through that event, and therefore it's very difficult for them to cope with.
Absolutely. I mean, and I totally understand that it's rarely going to be one phone call that will change somebody's state of mind, but But it must be very difficult to be able to judge and measure and gauge what impact that Papyrus is having sometimes. I mean, I'm fully aware that Papyrus claims that there's a lack of accurate national statistics relating to young suicide. And this is obviously something that's worried you for a while. I mean, any kind of activity on that front that's improving things that you're aware of?
It is a difficulty because we know that, for example, in England and Wales, any suicides that occur under the age of 10 are simply just not defined as a suicide. And then we're also battling as well with the issue of the standard of proof by which is used by coroners when determining whether or not somebody has died.
Do you want to say a little bit about that? Because I read that in your literature and I was quite intrigued by it. Do you want to say just a little bit about what you'd prefer to have?
Well, basically, as many of you will know, suicide is no longer a crime. Well, actually, it's something that maybe a lot of people don't know, because we're still using language such as committing suicide, which kind of dates back to when it used to be a criminal offence. Now, suicide was decriminalised back in 1961. However, coroners are still using the criminal court proceedings when defining whether or not somebody died by suicide. So if somebody died by criminal offence, they will go through the criminal court proceedings, which basically means the coroner has to decide or determine rather that the person died of that offence and has to prove beyond all reasonable doubt basically that they died by that offence. A standard court proceeding basically revolves around probability. So what is the likelihood that this person died by that way? With suicide, despite it being decriminalised, we're still using criminal courts. And therefore, what a lot of people who have died by suicide are going down as are things such as misadventure, accidental death, or perhaps a narrative or open verdict, which basically means the likelihood that this person died by suicide is quite high, but because we can't prove it 100%, we can't say for sure, and so we're missing a lot of people. And one of the even more devastating things about trying to get this changed is that the feedback we've had from coroners as to one of the reasons as to why they don't want to change it is because they want to save the family shame as to what's happened, which we strongly believe only perpetuates the stigma even further.
This is a complicated situation, isn't it?
Massively so, yeah, very much so. So it's something that we are campaigning to try and get changed because, as I said, it does affect those statistics, but also things like, it's very difficult for us to measure, for example, how many people are actually attempting suicide. Because if you attend A&E and either you've attempted suicide or you've self-harmed by perhaps a way of coping with life, you're grouped into the same category of intentional self-harm, and therefore we're not getting a full picture either there of how many people are contemplating or actively attempting suicide.
So the categorization and the recording and the kind of headlines that are recorded under, as well as the way that information is collected, are all areas where you feel that there should really be challenge and much better accuracy. And I think there's a word that also goes right through your kind of literature, which is sensitivity. I mean, interestingly, recently, that very recent Care Quality Commission report on mental health services that actually said that they were in crisis. And suicide prevention services for young people are very much part of that. But also they did say, and you mentioned it there, accident and emergency departments. The actual Care Quality Commission stated that only of about 30% of staff that worked in accident and emergency departments had the adequate degree of sensitivity to deal with young suicide.
That's right. Doctors and nurses will say themselves that they need more training, and I believe that training should begin, whilst they are, at university right at the beginning. Having an interest in becoming professionals in these fields and knowing that mental health will be a huge part of it. But despite that, suicide prevention is rarely covered in the curriculum. Despite having attended the Royal College of Nurses conference a year ago or so, it was highlighted as a huge need, and it was passed by over sort of 98% of nurses there. What was passed was the suggestion that all nurses should have suicide prevention training, and everyone's saying yes, yes, yes. But budgets and priorities, if you like, are perhaps getting in the way of that becoming part of their learning, where it is so necessary for them.
I mean, there's so many gaps, aren't there? And we're not talking about a very, very rare condition or something like that, where the big argument is about, do we spend this kind of money and time on training on it? Because, really in the scheme of things, it doesn't amount to very many numbers. But in this case, it really does amount to huge numbers, and the possibility of prevention, exponentially increasing. I mean, that report from the Care Quality Commission also said, and I'm quoting now, that the lack of reliable and up-to-date information about children and adolescents' mental health, such as the CAMS service, means that those planning and running CAMS services have been operating in a, quote, fog. So, I mean, the needs identified. The unfortunate thing is that need has been running along like an open sore for years now. Is that your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've been struggling for some time finding adequate resources and, enough, whether that's people or services, in order to meet the need that does appear to be increasing. But in spite of that, funding is being cut. And people just can't understand why more resources aren't being given. It's something like of the budget that goes towards children's services, children's mental health services in the UK, 0.8% is all that is given to children's mental health services. 0.8%, which is just horrific.
Okay. Now, one of the things you talked about there is not just literally resources, although this is obviously part of it, but your particular title, your job, includes the word training. And you do offer training to other agencies. That's part of the Papyrus kind of offer, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Who do you tend to work with, and what kind of form does the training take?
Well, I'm really glad you've asked that, actually, because with the view that organisations and services are really struggling. Papyrus always has communicated the view that suicide is and always will be everybody's business. And although I know that we've got an audience of a lot of professionals in this field, I would ask those listening to also take their hats off and consider, what might it be like actually to support somebody who is personally close to us, somebody in our informal relationships, because what we want to do is not only equip professionals, but also just equip the general public, and knowing that actually it's okay to have a conversation if we are concerned about somebody, about their mental health, about if they are having thoughts of suicide. And so not only are we targeting, if you like, professionals in the field, we're also saying actually, if you're a parent, you need to be aware that this is something that could affect a loved one, a child. This could affect a relative, a cousin, or it could affect your neighbour or your colleague. It's something that affects or could affect any one of us, and therefore we're trying to get the message across that our training is suitable not for just professionals, but for anybody who wants to do further preventative work in the field of suicide prevention.
Okay, well, we'll give all the Papyrus details before the end of the programme. There's no problem about that, how people can get in touch and so forth. But practically, how far and wide do you tend to be able to offer your training services at the moment? what kind of format, what practical, so say I was a member of the public, not necessarily a professional, we'll come to them in a minute, wanting to take up what you just talked about there, which is like raising awareness about a family member I was concerned about, or knowing how I could possibly, what the best way to offer them support is and so forth. I mean, how would they go about getting help from Papyrus?
Well, one of the first ways that they could get in touch with us would be via the National Helpline. I would suggest that first, so they can speak one-on-one with somebody directly if they're already concerned about somebody that they know. But with regards to our training, depending on how much people want to get involved, we'll deliver suicide awareness sessions, so just to kind of increase people's understanding and awareness of actually what we're dealing with. So, how many people are affected by suicide, how might we be able to identify somebody who could be at risk of suicide, who might we be able to signpost them onto, whether that's services, or how might we be able to help them specifically ourselves would be covered in a half-day training, which goes into things in a bit more detail. And then we also offer the ASSIST course as well, the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, which many of you may be aware of, given that it is...
well, assume people don't. I think that's the best bet. Let's just assume that a lot of people listening haven't managed to come across your work before.
Well, Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training is a product that's delivered on an international scale. It's a 2-day course that will basically teach an evidence-based structure, an evidence-based model called the Pathway to Assisting Life. And what all this will teach is having the skills and information needed to identify a person at risk, but confidently then approach them, explore suicide with them, and it takes you through and teaches you how to have a conversation with that person that results in basically keeping that person safe for now. So it's referred to suicide as suicide first aid, basically. So those kind of courses will deliver on a national scale. However, as we mentioned earlier, we are a growing organisation. So currently we are focusing on proactively engaging audiences in the northwest region of the UK and also the West Midlands area. Those are the 2 areas where we've got offices, but we're hoping to obviously expand and eventually have branches across the whole of the UK so that we can be much more accessible, if you like. Those training can be much more accessible by everybody across the UK.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll only say it sort of once or twice this bit, but let's assume that if all of us listening to this realise too that you are a charity and you operate very much by having to raise money for the work that you do. So, for people listening who've got access to any kind of funds whatsoever and think this is the right way to do it, then we'll give details of the Papyrus Helpline at the end and also the website. Now, I got a bit confused, one thing to do with a couple of things that Papyrus were standing for, and I'd like to explore that with you, Alice, if I could.
Yeah, sure.
On one hand, you quite logically talked about when talking about, say, the coroners or whatever, and the way that they approach the whole issue of suicide, and that bit about so-called shame, not wanting to bring shame on the family or any more sort of stigma to the family, and you disagreeing with that, saying it's much, much better if we open this whole subject out and it becomes part of a kind of family conversation and part of a kind of a social conversation rather than keeping it in the shadows, as it were, as some kind of terrible thing to be avoided. Yet, on the other hand, you do, as an organisation, feel strongly that sometimes the media should be criticised for some of the way that they report and present suicides. And in a way that seems a bit paradoxical to me. On one hand wanting more openness, and on the other hand saying hang about, because sometimes the media reporting of it might encourage other young people to kind of copycat or whatever. Do you see what I'm getting at? There's maybe a bit of a paradox here. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, David, what we're trying to do is educate people on how to be more open about suicide, but how to do that in a safe and sensitive way so that we're not putting other people at further risk. Talking openly about suicide in a respectful manner will not put anybody at risk. What it will do is, if say we started, say we were sitting on a train and we were having a conversation safely and sensitively about suicide, and a person at risk of suicide on the train overheard us, then what that could actually do is build confidence in that person that actually suicide perhaps isn't as much of a taboo subject as maybe they thought it would be. And if they can see or overhear two people talking about it sensitively and in a respectful manner, then it may encourage them to speak to somebody else in the hope that they will also respond in the way that they have observed those two people doing so. Now, what we're trying to work with the media to do is to adhere to the World Health Organization's media guidelines that do state how to report a suicide safely and sensitively, i.e. not to include excessive detail. For example, where did a person die? How did they die? Photos and things like that. Sensationalize or romanticize. So we strongly discourage people from reporting a suicide and putting it on the front page of a newspaper. We don't want people focusing on, this young person died by suicide and hundreds of people attended their funeral and wasn't that lovely? Because for a young person who may feel that they want to end their life because nobody cares about them, may be more attracted to the idea of ending their life if they think, well, loads of people will then turn up to my funeral. So it will prove that maybe they do care about me. So there's certain ways in which, we need to avoid talking about suicide that could put other people at risk. So we're trying to educate people about too, in order to do that. And that's what our media campaign is focusing on.
I think, Bill, that would be good then to draw people's attention to that, because, you can obviously see on one hand, whether you agree with it or not is another matter, but I mean, you can obviously see on one hand, for example, when we had all that issue about the clusters of suicides in Wales and so forth,
Yes.
the kind of almost salacious reporting that occurred about that, because it got people into quite a frenzy. But the media, they couldn't avoid it because it was a big story. But on the other hand, you want how they actually deal with it to be sensitive to the idea that there are young people on the brink listening.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think, the situation that happened in Wales in Bridgend, was extremely, extremely devastating. They lost 79 young people to the same method over a 5-year span between 2007 and 2012. And a lot of people did put that down to the media. There are a couple of theories kind of going around, and Papyrus worked with the media to try and make sure that they were reporting those sensitively. But in a town of 100,000 population, that was it. You also have to kind of take into consideration that word of mouth, would also have played a role in this. And it wasn't until there'd been about 19 suicides that the media actually started reporting it. So there'd been that many already before they focused on it.
What might be interesting, actually, is, I don't know if it's within Papyrus's thoughts, but I mean, what I've done in the past in child, broader child protection terms, is that I've actually been along and lectured to journalism students. Just prior to them graduating, to give a sense of what the child protection community is interested in and why, and therefore give them background so that when they get to their newspapers and when they get to become fully fledged journalists, they will have some degree of understanding. And that sounds like something that might well be an idea for Papyrus as well.
I think that's a really great suggestion, yeah. And I think that goes for a lot of professions, doesn't it? That, we need to be getting to people who want to train in these professions where they will be talking about suicide so that they know exactly, how to do that in the appropriate way before they begin those roles.
I'd like to just draw, there's a few, we've probably got about another 5 minutes, okay, and then we'll give out the details of Papyrus. But there's something I found really interesting, was that just before the general election, Papyrus wrote to all the political parties in England with questions about their policies on young suicide. And my understanding from your literature is that the only person that responded was David Cameron. And that was just a general letter he sent back, sort of saying, we started a program in 2012, and that was about it. But none of the other parties whatsoever responded. And for such a significant campaign, that did seem pretty strange to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were disappointed that we only had one party respond to our letters. David Cameron was the only one that responded to that, which is disappointing.
Anyway, well, maybe they'll maybe hope somebody will listen to this and have a bit of a wake-up call, because it seems pretty crucial that people start taking a sort of account of the crisis, if you like, in our country at the moment. Now, I know, because as you know, I chair the Tameside Safeguarding Children Board, and you came along to our annual conference and made a good presentation, and 100 people went away better informed and better aware about young suicide and prevention. But you're also having your annual conference in about, 3 days' time now at Saturday at Resource for London in Holloway Road in London?
That's correct.
And I guess, is that open to people to come if they can?
It is, absolutely, yeah. If you visit our website, which, as David said, we'll give the details out.
Give it now as well.
So our website is www.papyrus-uk.org. Papyrus is spelt Papyrus, and there's details of the conference on there, exactly what that will entail, any of the speakers that we're having and workshops that will be delivered, and anybody that conference is open to anybody who would like to attend, and I believe places are still available for that this coming Saturday.
That's good. And 01925 572 444 is your telephone number.
Absolutely, that's the office inquiries, yes.
And that's for all general inquiries about training or conferences or literature or just general information about Papyrus. Now, let's talk about your National Confidential Helpline, which is called HOPELineUK.
That's right, yeah.
And I've got it here. It's 0800 068 4141. That's 0800 068 4141. You get quite a volume of traffic, don't you?
Yeah, and increasingly so as well. There's been about sort of a 5,000 new contacts in 2014 as compared to 2013, and on average, what we've seen in 2015 so far is that that figure has also increased yet again. But there's a few theories, if you like, again as to why that might be, because some people question, well, does that mean that people are more in need of your service, more people are more at risk of suicide? But we, as a growing charity, we are consistently coming into contact with audiences who haven't heard of Papyrus before, and so you could also put it down to just more awareness being raised of the helpline being there.
And one of the key services you do offer, of course, as well as the helpline, is the training function for all sorts of different agencies, and as well as the general public that we talked about before. And if an agency or an organisation wanted to have Papyrus come along and deliver training, it would be that 01925 572 444 number or your website. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. There's a training inquiry form on the website, or you can email me directly on the training email, which is training@papyrus-uk.org.
Okay, now one final thing then, Alice, is that you may be aware that this podcast is listened to in a number of countries around the world, as well as the UK. And I am absolutely certain, and I know from previous conversations, that there are initiatives such as Papyrus is offering in different formats around the world as well. I presume you would be quite willing and happy to have organizations and initiatives abroad contact Papyrus and share information?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so just put that call out there for anybody listening anywhere in the world that actually works on this kind of subject or has information or evidence that they think might be of help to Papyrus to contact them. So, Alice, I think that's been terrific talking to you today, and I really wish Papyrus luck, and I hope you continue to expand, and I hope the work continues to diminish. Of course I do. So thank you very much indeed for talking to me today.
Thank you.
Well, great thanks to Alice for that interview. I hope you all can take note of the great work that Papyrus is doing, and if it's anything that you can incorporate into what you do or who you talk to about this subject, please do so. Now, you can download this from iTunes, or alternatively you can just get it from the website www.socialworldpodcast.com, or Thoughts on the Social World will get you to it as well. But leave me these voice messages if you can. It's just to the left of the page on the website, and just leave a voice message, and tell me some of the thoughts you have about future editions and things that you have to do. And you can also now get this through Care Knowledge, or you may be aware that I also have a subscribers page on the Guardian Social Care Network, and they publicise the podcast as well. So for all of you here in the UK and around the world, thank you very much indeed for listening, and I'll be back with you soon. Thank you.